Welcome to part 46 of Basic Training. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play Ribbon Road on 150cc. And buckle up, because this is probably the second hardest course in the entire game. Things start off innocuous enough. Move slightly to the right when the run begins and build up a Super Mini Turbo. Then immediately build up another Super Mini Turbo around the next turn before starting a left drift and Mini Turbo tricking off the ramp. Oh wait, did I say innocuous? I lied. That Mini Turbo trick that we just did is one of the most deceptively simple things in the entire game. If you look closely, you'll notice that I purposely hold on to my Super Mini Turbo well after it's actually charged. This isn't because I was trying to build up an Ultra Mini Turbo and just messed it up. The thing is that when you start that left drift before the orange boost ramp, you must make sure that you do it in such a way that you don't land on the ground until you're already partway up the hill. This is because we don't have a lot of time or space to charge up that Mini Turbo, meaning that we must hold left for a bit to do so. In order to do that, we're going to use the airtime that we get from this little bump so that we can hold left on the joystick to charge the Mini Turbo in mid-air without changing our direction. Now the obvious question is, why not just start the drift earlier? It's true that this will buy us more time to build up the Mini Turbo, but the problem is that the longer you spend in the left drift, obviously the farther left you're going to go. And doing the left drift off the hill in the way that I'm suggesting prevents some of that leftwards movement. This is really important because the green ribbon immediately following the orange boost ramp is quite narrow, and any extra left movement done before going off the ramp will dramatically increase your likelihood of going into the off-road. The last thing to point out about this strategy is the trick itself. It's important that you hold left on the joystick when doing the trick, since for some reason tricking with your joystick pointing in the direction of your drift causes you to get launched even farther than a normal Mini Turbo trick. Can you believe we're only 10 seconds into the run so far? I hope you enjoyed that launch trick strategy, by the way, because we're about to do it again. After building up a Super Mini Turbo around the first turn in the green ribbon section, we're going to drive straight for a bit and then start a wide left drift so that we can grab the 3 coins around the next turn, releasing that drift as soon as we get a Super Mini Turbo. We're going to immediately start another left drift so that we can charge a Mini Turbo before this next hill, and then we're going to do the exact same thing we just did at the start of the run on this second orange boost ramp, except with the directions reversed. And once again, that's a Super Mini Turbo into a Mini Turbo into a wide right drift off the top of the hill, hold right while in midair to charge the Mini Turbo, widen up before the orange boost ramp, and then do a right trick off the orange boost ramp to launch yourself into the blue ribbon portion of the track. Now I know you're probably thinking that because there aren't any more orange boost ramps that we're pretty much good to go now, but welcome to one of the most ridiculous 15 seconds of any track in the whole game. The basic story here is that this section of the track is a blue ribbon that waves up and down, and we can trick off the peaks of these waves. There are also 2 shortcut paths that we want to take that save a ton of time, but combining these shortcuts with the tricks off the blue waves is a Sisyphean task that will have you questioning your sanity by the time you've actually figured it out. So let's figure it out together, shall we? Before we get started, the strat that I use is definitely not the fastest, but it's the best strat that I could find that balances speed with consistency. When landing from the launch trick, land in a right drift and hold wide for a bit to grab the coin. Release the Mini Turbo as soon as you get it and trick off the peak of the first wave that you see. Then land in a right drift and brake drift for just a fraction of a second by holding B to tighten your line. And when you're directly facing the shortcut, trick again to boost yourself towards it before tricking off the first ramp. Now when tricking off the first ramp, it's very important to angle yourself slightly to the left. This is because when we land from that first trick, we want to land in a right drift and be as far to the left as possible. Why? Because there's another shortcut path coming up, and like the first shortcut, we want to trick off the peak of the hill before it, but that boost is going to propel us in whatever direction we're facing when we land from the trick. And if you start the right drift from a very wide line like we did, then that boost will push you in a direction that's almost parallel with the shortcut path. And even though it's not perfect, you'll have more than enough time to course correct a bit to make it back onto the path, at which point you can just trick off the next 2 ramps. If, however, you approach the turn from the right-hand side of the track, then the boost will propel you clean over the shortcut path and you'll get latitude. Now the problem with all this is that these waves operate on a global cycle, and if you get here at a different time than me, you might not be able to do this setup consistently. This is especially true when considering that the cycles may be different on all 3 laps. But thank the dear Lord that at my pace the waves were in the exact same position every time. The reason I bring all this up is that it would be impossible for me to tell you what to do for every possible position of the waves, so if you want something that you can execute more easily on all 3 laps, then what you can do is just not trick off any of the waves and purposely take wide enough lines to give you just enough time to make sure you're driving straight towards the paths. Thankfully, there's nothing particularly noteworthy about the mushroom shortcut, and not only that, but laps 2 and 3 play more or less exactly the same as lap 1. Even the launch trick setups are pretty much the same, so with all that out of the way, we can talk about the world record for a bit. I'm going to be so bold as to say that it's mostly the same as what I do. The most obvious difference is that with the second ramp, they do this ridiculous strategy where they trick off the bottom of the hill and then land in a drift off the top of the hill, which allows them to mini turbo trick off the first ramp and then motion glider off the second ramp. They also build up one more mini turbo after the mushroom cut. Now you may be asking yourself, if things are mostly the same, why am I more than 7 seconds off the current world record? Well, that's because what I didn't tell you is that they play the entire blue ribbon section very differently than I do. Normally this would be the point where I'd go into excruciating detail about exactly how, but honestly that deserves an entire video unto itself because this track has one of the most ridiculous world record progressions of any track in the game. Fortunately, P, who's a world record holder on some of the tracks himself, is already working on just such a video. I'll put a link to it in the pinned comment and in the description, so definitely head to his channel and check it out because he makes some awesome content. So that's it for the strats. Let's talk a bit more about the track while checking out my current personal best. This run is actually the end result of my second attempt at really grinding it out, and I managed to save about 1.5 seconds off my previous personal best that was set like 1.5 years ago, and most of that came down to the 2 launch tricks. I was honestly really worried that I wasn't going to be able to figure them out, but fortunately I did manage to get them down, so if my explanations and really the video as a whole helped you out, I'd really appreciate if you could drop a like on it to help it get spread to more people. Now as for Ribbon Road itself, this really is a pretty great track. I know that I said in my track ranking video that I thought it was overrated, but even as a quote-unquote overrated track, it's still in my top 16, so take that for what it's worth. It's one of the few courses in the game that has intended alternate path shortcuts that actually require skill to get through, the only other ones being Toad Harbor and Ice Ice Outpost if I'm remembering correctly. I understand that Nintendo is trying to cater to a more casual audience with this game, but I really wish that stuff like this existed in more courses because it makes them feel a lot more exciting and cool. So then why exactly did I used to be a Ribbon Road hater? I think the time trial honestly used to just bug me a lot because I couldn't figure out any of the strategies, but like so many of the other courses in the game, now that I've actually learned how to deal with the challenges that I previously thought were insurmountable, I actually enjoy it quite a bit more than I used to, and really, isn't that a good lesson for life in general? Honestly though, this track is really difficult to optimize, and my suggestion is that if you're just trying to figure out how to play it online, then go for one of the easier ribbon strats instead of trying to get a bunch of extra tricks like I do. Now speaking of online play, a word of caution. The shortcut paths are super tight, and one thing I didn't mention is that you're in anti-grav physics the entire time you're on the blue ribbon section. So it's very easy to get bumped off the track, and even if you don't, people absolutely love to put bananas and bombs there, so you're definitely going to want to be careful when taking those cuts. Now the other nice thing about those shortcuts is that you can still get a double item box off the glider ramp, so you're not actually sacrificing anything by taking the cuts. And if for whatever reason you decide not to take the shortcuts, then just go around and get as many tricks as you can off the ribbons. All in all, Ribbon Road really is a fun course to play, and I hope that you were able to make use of a lot of the strats that I laid out for you in this video. And that's everything you need to know to play Ribbon Road on 150cc. If you found the video helpful, again, don't forget to do all the algorithm bait like liking the video and commenting, and consider subscribing as well because I do release a lot of Mario Kart content and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next video.